And there's so many stories about what's at the bottom of Lake Tahoe and what's in here. And to have a camera go down and show us, I'm on board. I want to know what's going on.
More than 1,600 feet below the surface. Pressure nearly 50 times greater than at the surface. And sunlight hasn't reached its deepest parts for thousands of years. When scientists finally descended into Lake Tahoe, they expected to find a completely barren, lifeless lakebed, untouched by time. Instead, their cameras revealed something no one was prepared to see. Hidden beneath the crystal-clear water stood a 6,000-year-old forest, its ancient trees still standing exactly where they had grown thousands of years ago. And that was only the beginning. Because as the team continued exploring the lakebed, they would uncover objects that would transform this beautiful lake into one of America's darkest underwater mysteries. So, what have scientists found at the bottom of Lake Tahoe? Let's dive in. The clearest lake in America. Lake Tahoe sits high in the Sierra Nevada mountains, right along the border of California and Nevada. From the shoreline, it looks almost unreal. Crystal clear blue water stretches toward snow-covered peaks, while towering pine trees and massive granite cliffs surround the lake from every direction. It's easy to understand why millions of people visit every year, but beneath that peaceful surface lies a completely different world. At its deepest point, Lake Tahoe plunges an astonishing 1,645 feet, making it the second deepest lake in the United States. To put that into perspective, if you placed the entire Empire State Building on the lakebed, it would disappear beneath the water with hundreds of feet still above its roof. And the deeper you go, the stranger the lake becomes. Sunlight gradually fades until it disappears completely. The water stays just above freezing throughout the year, barely changing with the seasons. There are few nutrients, very little oxygen. It's an environment where time seems to slow down. Objects that would normally rot away can survive for decades, or even thousands of years. Ancient wood remains remarkably well preserved, and in rare situations, even human remains can undergo a natural process called adipocere, often known as grave wax. Instead of decomposing normally, body fat slowly transforms into a wax-like substance that can preserve clothing, facial features, and other soft tissues for far longer than most people would ever imagine. That single scientific fact gave rise to one of Lake Tahoe's darkest legends. During the 1940s and 1950s, the lake transformed into one of America's premier vacation destinations. Luxury hotels, glamorous casinos, and celebrity visitors turned the quiet mountain lake into a playground for the rich and famous. But wherever money flows, organized crime is never far behind. Before long, local rumors began spreading that victims of the mob were being dumped into Lake Tahoe. The lake's incredible depth, freezing temperatures, and mysterious underwater environment made it seem like the perfect place for bodies to disappear forever. With no technology capable of exploring the deepest parts of the lake, no one could prove. The rumors became even darker. Some claimed that bodies were still standing on the lakebed, perfectly preserved in suits, their faces untouched by time. Others insisted divers had seen figures emerging from the darkness before vanishing again into the depths. But there was no way to know. The bottom of Lake Tahoe lay more than 1,000 feet below the surface, in an environment too deep and too dangerous for ordinary divers to reach. For decades, the lakebed remained almost completely unexplored, allowing the rumors to spread unchecked. Then, in the early 1970s, a famous explorer descended into the depths of Lake Tahoe. And what he said afterward transformed a local legend into an international mystery, a place full of surprises. Jacques Cousteau was one of the world's most famous underwater explorers and filmmakers. By the 1970s, he had spent decades exploring places few people had ever seen. His documentaries introduced millions to the hidden world beneath the oceans, and his discoveries made him one of the most trusted voices in underwater exploration. Then came Lake Tahoe. According to a story that spread across the country, Cousteau descended into the lake's icy depths before returning to the surface looking unusually shaken. When someone supposedly asked him what he had seen, his response was just one sentence. Whether those words were ever spoken or not, they changed everything. The quote spread from one person to another, then from newspapers and television to internet forums and social media. Some claimed Cousteau had discovered perfectly preserved bodies resting on the lakebed. Others believed he had found evidence of mafia victims hidden beneath the water. The lake's crystal-clear beauty had become overshadowed by stories of death, secrets, and unexplained discoveries. For many people, the quote was proof enough. If Jacques Cousteau had really seen something terrifying, then perhaps the old rumors were true after all. No one could ever find any evidence that Cousteau had actually said those words. Yet proving it wrong wasn't easy either, because no one could simply swim down and look. The deepest parts of Lake Tahoe lie more than 1,600 feet below the surface. At those depths, crushing pressure and the lake's high elevation make human diving extremely dangerous. Long before reaching the bottom, ordinary scuba divers would have to turn back. The lake kept its secrets hidden in the darkness, until scientists finally developed the technology to explore places no human could safely reach. Using remotely operated underwater vehicles equipped with powerful lights and high-definition cameras, they descended to the bottom of Lake Tahoe for the very first time. And what they found left everyone shocked. Beneath the crystal-clear water. In 1998, researchers from the U.S. Geological Survey launched one of the most ambitious scientific expeditions ever carried out on Lake Tahoe. Their mission wasn't to prove the old legends right or wrong. They wanted to create the first complete map of the lake's floor. Lake Tahoe is simply too deep for divers to explore safely. At more than 1,600 feet, much of the lake lies far beyond the limits of human diving. If scientists wanted answers, they needed a different approach, so they turned to sound. Working from a research vessel called the RV Inland Surveyor, the team used an advanced system known as multi-beam sonar. The equipment sent hundreds of sound waves toward the lakebed every second. As those sound waves bounced back, powerful computers calculated the distance to the bottom. The survey boat crisscrossed the lake from one shoreline to the other, repeating the process again and again. By the end of the expedition, the scientists had collected more than 65 million individual depth measurements. It was the most detailed map of Lake Tahoe ever created, and almost immediately, something caught their attention. Most of the lakebed appeared exactly as expected. Broad stretches of smooth sediment, steep underwater slopes, and deep canyons carved thousands of years ago. But scattered across several areas were strange shapes. Unlike the flat lakebed surrounding them, these objects stood upright. Some appeared grouped together. Others cast long shadows across the sonar images. They clearly weren't ordinary rocks, yet sonar could only reveal their shape. It couldn't reveal what they actually were. The mystery had only grown deeper. So several years later, researchers returned with something they had never had before: an underwater robot. Known as a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, it carried powerful lights and high-definition cameras capable of exploring places no human diver could safely reach. Guided from the surface through a long tether, the vehicle slowly descended into the darkness. At first, sunlight still reached the water around it. The sandy bottom looked peaceful, but with every 100 feet, the lake grew darker. The robot's headlights became the only source of light in a world that had remained hidden for thousands of years. Then the sonar targets appeared once again. The operator carefully guided the ROV toward them. The lights swept across the darkness, and suddenly something emerged from the lakebed. Not rocks, not wreckage, but trees. Rooted exactly where they had grown, undisturbed. They had grown on dry land, roots deep in soil that had once seen open sky, long before any of this ground was ever underwater at all. But how did they end up here? The underwater forest. Some researchers estimated these trees to be around 6,000 years old. And that was true. They were already growing here long before the pyramids rose in Egypt. Yet their age was only part of the mystery. They still stood where they had grown. A sudden flood would likely have snapped their trunks, pulled up their roots, and pushed the trees together. Instead, the forest remained upright, as if the water had slowly climbed around it. That detail made the discovery even harder to explain. The evidence suggests that the land once sat above the lake, and the water later covered it. The lake must have risen through a process gentle enough to leave much of the forest in place. Scientists can see the result, but the exact story behind that change remains uncertain. That uncertainty makes the forest more fascinating. The trees are real. Their age is real. Their position beneath hundreds of feet of water is real. What remains unknown is how the landscape changed without destroying the forest. The cameras stayed with the ancient trunks. Their branches faded into the darkness, while the ROV lights moved slowly across the old wood. Then the vehicle continued deeper, leaving the forest behind. The ancient trees had shown what Lake Tahoe could preserve. Now the survey moved toward another part of the lake bed far below, where sonar was still searching through the sediment. At around 600 feet, the instruments began picking up harder returns clustered across the floor. This time, the shapes did not look like trees. They appeared against the sediment in a pattern that caught the team's attention. Every return carried a simple question. Was this another part of the ancient landscape? The answer waited just beyond the camera's narrow beam. The vehicle moved closer, its lights cutting through the dark water. The cameras searched the area while the sonar marked each shape on the map. The old legends returned to everyone's mind. This was the kind of darkness where people had imagined bodies resting unseen for decades. Yet, the machines were about to replace those old stories with something far more ordinary. The ancient forest had shown what the lake could preserve, and the next discovery would show what people had left behind, what the cameras found. As the cameras moved closer, the shapes came into view. At first, the ROV lights showed only scattered objects resting on the sediment. A plastic bottle appeared. A tire sat among fishing gear and other discarded material. Nothing looked like the preserved figures from the stories. The scene became stranger because the lake had kept these objects for years. Glass and aluminum lay beside plastic and other sunken junk, spread across the floor that people had once imagined as a hidden graveyard. For a moment, the legend seemed to collapse in front of the cameras. The machines had gone into the darkness expecting something unusual. Someone had carried those bottles onto a boat. Each object had a simple beginning on the surface before the lake claimed it. That detail changed the meaning of the search. The same cold, still water that could slow decomposition had also preserved something else. The cameras kept moving across the mapped floor, and the pattern became harder to ignore. This was not one forgotten bottle or a single lost piece of equipment. It was an accumulating scatter of glass, aluminum, plastic, and other junk resting on the sediment. The discovery also gave the survey a practical purpose. The map they built was no longer just a scientific record. It could show divers and cleanup teams exactly where debris was lying below, giving them specific locations to return to and clear piece by piece. The search had started with legends, yet the lake had answered with evidence that belonged to the living world. For decades, people repeated the story that legendary explorer Jacques Cousteau had descended into Lake Tahoe, returned visibly shaken, and issued a chilling warning. The world isn't ready for what's down there. It was a story that inspired countless rumors about perfectly preserved bodies hidden beneath the surface. But when researchers searched for proof, they found something surprising. There was no verified recording, no confirmed interview, no reliable source showing that Cousteau had ever said those words. And when they examined that area with modern cameras, they found no evidence of a hidden graveyard, no rows of preserved victims, no mysterious figures standing in the darkness. What they found was even more astonishing: an ancient underwater forest. Scientists still cannot fully explain how thousands of years of rising water submerged an entire forest without destroying it. The lake's incredible depth is real. Its freezing temperatures are real. Its ability to preserve objects for decades, and in some cases much longer, is also real. Those are genuine scientific mysteries that researchers continue to study. However, after decades of rumors, scientists have found no reliable evidence supporting the legend of perfectly preserved bodies hidden beneath Lake Tahoe. And what scientists have proven is, in many ways, whatever sinks beneath the surface doesn't simply disappear. It stays, waiting in the darkness until someone finally comes looking. And that means Lake Tahoe doesn't just hold water. The lake remembers everything. Long before scientists lowered cameras into Lake Tahoe, the Washoe people already understood that this place deserved respect. These were the Native American people whose ancestors have lived in and around the Lake Tahoe Basin for thousands of years, relying on its forests, streams, and wildlife for their way of life. They called the lake Tahoe, meaning the edge of the lake. Over time, early European settlers mispronounced the name, and Tahoe gradually became Tahoe. The lake was never just water surrounded by mountains. It was home. Their tradition spoke of powerful spirits known as water babies, believed to live in certain parts of the lake. Before crossing the water or setting out to fish, families were said to leave offerings such as pine nuts or food along the shoreline, asking for safe passage and showing respect for the place that sustained them. Whether someone believed those stories or not, the message behind them was remarkably practical. Treat the lake with respect. That lesson has taken on a different meaning. Today's scientists no longer explain Lake Tahoe through legends. They explain it through geology and thousands of hours of research. Yet many have reached a surprisingly similar conclusion. Lake Tahoe is one of the most carefully protected lakes in the United States. In 1969, California and Nevada created the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, better known as TRPA, to protect the entire Tahoe Basin from uncontrolled development and pollution. 4 years later, in 1973, the U.S. Forest Service established the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, bringing most of the surrounding public land under a single management system focused on conservation and restoration. Those agencies work alongside universities, conservation groups, and local communities for one reason. Lake Tahoe is incredibly fragile. But once fine particles, trash, or pollutants enter the lake, that is why organizations like the League to Save Lake Tahoe, founded in 1957, continue to organize cleanups, monitor pollution, and push for stronger protections across the basin. The cameras proved exactly why that work matters. They didn't uncover monsters. They didn't uncover a hidden graveyard and other debris resting quietly on the lake bed, objects that had remained there for who knows how long. It was a place that preserved the past and reminded us that nature does not forget. Now it's your turn to answer. What do you think the ancient forest tells us about Lake Tahoe's past? And which discovery changed the way you see this lake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want more incredible mysteries, discoveries, and true stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.